where I feel at the moment in the last week or so has been that I've reached that snow part that's like solid ice, right? So it's the trickiest bit actually to get up and over. I've got my ice axes out and I'm like hacking into the ice. And some days, some moments I'm like making it up. Other days I'm like sliding down with my axes. And so I want to be real and vulnerable about how this feels to be in this moment, because when you're in it, it sometimes feels like you're a failure. Welcome to Limitless, Unlocking Your True Potential. I'm your host, Fiona Walsh, here to guide you on a journey of transformation and emotional freedom. Each week, we'll dive into the stories of change makers, cycle breakers, and experts in personal development, emotional wellness, and healing. Together, we'll uncover what holds us back and discover the tools to step boldly into a life of purpose and possibility. If this episode resonates with you, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. Let's amplify these stories and create a ripple effect of impact. Your limitless life starts now. Welcome to Limitless. Today's episode is a solo, and it's going to be a really raw, real reflection on where I'm at currently in my life, in my business, and in my identity. And we're going to go into what it's like to be about to shift into a new identity, but your old identity is still pulling you back, and your protective mechanism pulling you back because that's where you feel safer. I'm going to talk about letting go of old identities and the grief that can come up with that. And I'm also going to go into my relationship with my intuition and how that has evolved rapidly over the last few years, and how it is in this next version of me that I'm just stepping into such an integral, maybe it's at the heart of everything that I do, and how it really has been a process to get to this place where I believe in myself enough to trust my intuition, and also to not just share it with a small group of people who I trust and who are in the intuitive world, but also share it broadly with you all through the Limitless community, and then also with all of my clients in my coaching containers. If this episode resonates to you and you feel like you're in this in-between space of who you were for so many years and who you know you want to be, or maybe you're really close to being that person, please reach out. My Inner Freedom Method helps you walk through in a step-by-step process from where you are to where you want to be, so you can embody, you can step into your authenticity, your purpose, and start to live the life that you were destined to live, what your true essence is, what you were put on this planet to do. And that involves shedding all the stories, all the conditioning, all the parts of you that you thought you had to be, and just coming back to yourself and acknowledging and then embodying all the parts that you were put on this planet to be and do. Okay. So I want you to imagine you're hiking up a mountain, and if you're in North America at the moment, we are going through snow melt season. So summer's coming, temperatures are warming. So you can hike up most way up most mountains, and it will be grass. There's probably bears around eating the berries that are coming out. But when you get closer to the top, there's still snow and ice. This is where I feel like I'm at the moment. I am going to the top of this peak, and at the peak, I know is my new identity and my next level. But I'm not quite there. I'm bloody close though. And where I feel at the moment in the last week or so has been that I've reached that snow part that's like solid ice, right? So it's the trickiest bit actually to get up and over. I've got my ice axes out and I'm like hacking into the ice. And some days, some moments I'm like making it up. Other days I'm like sliding down with my axes. And so I want to be real and vulnerable about how this feels to be in this moment, because when you're in it, It sometimes feels like you're a failure. It sometimes feels like you're not actually going to get there, but it's the wobble before the big upgrade, the big evolution. And it can feel confusing and uncomfortable, and you can have the most amount of self-doubt in this wobble, but it is the step before your identity recalibrates to the next level. And so I know I'm there. I'm almost there. And I wanted to walk you through some of the things that have come up in the last week that I'm working through. I'm processing some of the tools that I've used, some of the insights I've had. So to really like just be super transparent around what this looks like when you're in this last little bit, like the last edge before you go through an identity recalibration or upgrade. And for me, a lot of this has been about letting go of the parts of me that were pleasing in the past. So the people pleaser who struggled with boundaries, who was confident telling the truth, but would pull back in certain situations. So I didn't own my truth all the time. And in those situations, I was abandoning myself in order to keep other people comfortable. And this next version of me, none of those parts are the lack of truth telling and the worrying about other people, the hypervigilance of like, if I say that, will it upset or offend? Those parts of me not coming forward with me. And so what's been interesting is though that I've had quite a few different emotions coming up in this letting go of that process. And so when I was in a one-on-one session with my intuitive coach last week, she's an intuitive and she channels messages for me from my guides and also my parts. And she had this really funny visual that came up for her. So she's clairvoyant. She sees visuals and images in her mind's eye. But she saw for me the old Fiona and then the new Fiona that I'm stepping into. And so, and it was pretty funny because it was Sandy D from Greece. So if you guys have seen the movie, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and Greece was one of the videos that we had saved on the like 10 VCR tapes that we had in our house, which meant I think my sister and I watched it probably like 250 times. So I know Greece really well. So it wasn't lost on me that she got this visual of Greece because I know the character so well. But if you guys remember Sandy D at the start when she came to the high school, she was like very prim and proper and perfect and said all the right things and did all the right things. She was a bit naive. And then she meets this guy who's a bit of a bad guy. And over the course of the movie, she transforms and then she comes out in the last scene and in like leathers, and she's like sexy and foxy and she's smoking a cigarette and she sort of like recalibrates into this like different version of Sandy D. And it's hilarious. And so this was the visual that my coach got for me in terms of like, these are the two worlds that you're dancing in. You're letting go of the people pleaser, Fiona, who looked a certain way and said things in a certain way, but it was always for external validation or always in this state of hypervigilance of like trying to make sure that I didn't disappoint or offend or make anyone around me uncomfortable, that I was keeping everyone on side in order to maintain relationships and keep it all together, which as you can hear was fucking exhausting. And then this new version of me is really like moving from a place of self-trust, of positive intent, and that knowing that my opinions matter and they don't need to be worded in a particular way to ensure that they meet the needs of everyone who is listening. And this podcast has been a very good learning environment for me to blow up that belief, because I know when I put these episodes out, some of the things that are being talked about could trigger you and piss you off. And some of the things that I think haven't even been that big a deal, people have been bothered by. And so I literally have realized, like, thankfully now, zero control over how people are going to respond to what you say, because it's all about where they're at on their journey or how they're feeling in that any given moment, particularly if they've had like a shit day and they're pretty triggered or tired themselves. So this is the evolution from Sandy D, prim and proper, to how she shows up at the end of Greece. And this part of me, this pleaser part of me is a very strong part, because it was a huge part of my upbringing. And in my childhood programming, we were brought up to be the good kids, the good girls, the good boys. We were very respectful. We always dressed a certain way, presented well. We would say things to please others. And all of this was in our conditioning was done with open heart, positive intent. However, it's not the type, I don't need this conditioning anymore. It actually doesn't work for me in podcasting, and it doesn't work for me in the coaching that I'm doing now. So it's time to say goodbye to that part. But I'm still in this, as I said, I'm at the top of the mountain and my ice picks keep sliding. So after the session I had on at end of last week with my intuitive coach, where I got this really strong visual from her around who I was and then who I'm becoming, I went to yoga on Saturday morning, and in the class, I felt like I had something stuck in my body, an emotion stuck in my body. And my sense was that it was related to this old versus new identity. And at the moment, in the coaching certification that I'm completing, I'm actually studying something called somatic experiencing, which is not mind-based. It's completely body-based work. So if you've been in a situation where you've been through talk therapy and you've tried to think your way through your problems or your patterns or your trauma, and you've gotten to the stage where you've talked and talked for hours and probably cried a lot and been through a lot, but you actually haven't shifted anything, then that was me. And the somatic work is where you bypass the brain and your thinking mind and your talking voice, and you go deep into your subconscious, deep into your programming, and you go straight to the source, and you're able to dissolve these patterns, these wounds, these memories very quickly, because your body knows how to heal. And we know our body knows how to heal because, if you get a cut on your hand or in your mouth or something and you actually don't do anything to it, within a couple of days, it'll be completely gone. You can put a Band-Aid and cream and all the things, but if you don't do that, your body will heal itself. And so it works the same for emotions that are stuck in your body. And for the parts that are playing out in your body. So this work that I'm learning, and I'm integrating it straight into my own life first, as well as with my coaching clients, which I could talk to a little bit at the end. I embodied this somatic certification work in the yoga session. So I felt tension in my hips, which is where people hold a lot of emotion. And so, because I was already dropped into a very present state because I'd been in yoga for 50 minutes, we were lying down doing stretches. And so I put my hands onto the part of my body where I felt the tension, which was my hips. And I felt into the sensation. And I asked my body if it could talk, what would it say to me? And the first word that came up was rage. I was like, oh, Jesus, okay. And then after a little bit of while, I was like, if rage could speak, what would it say? And then rage said, I feel resentful. And when I heard the word resentful in my head, I had a full body shivers, which is my intuition saying yes. And what I realized in that moment, and then in the hour afterwards when I did some integration work, was that I was feeling resentful for how I had showed up in the world for the past how many decades. And that I was resentful towards this pleaser part because she at times had not said no to things that she didn't want to do, and then it left her overwhelmed. This part had agreed with things which she didn't actually think were good ideas, but didn't want to rock the boat. And so there's a lot of stories and memories around where I'd wished I'd showed up differently. And what has become really evident for me as I've progressed through this week is that this part of me, this old identity, was very formative, and it played an important part in my life and shaped who I am today. And that my work this week was really to meet this part with forgiveness and an open heart and compassion, and accept that I actually wouldn't be here right now having this conversation, doing this work, if I hadn't have been through all that and I hadn't have been the pleaser who then decided that that wasn't for them going forward. And so it's been this, quite an interesting realization that the resentment I was holding was valid, but once I released it, and I physically felt a release in this yoga class, moving out of my hips. And then I was quite emotional in the hour afterwards, but it was like release emotion. It wasn't like sad tears. It just felt really healing, I would say, was that I was releasing what I'd been holding on to, this resentment, this rage, this like being annoyed at myself for how I'd showed up in the world. And since releasing that, it really has helped me move into a place of forgiveness and like acceptance that the place is coming with me. All those stories, what got me here was with the pleaser. And she did really well in corporate. She was very successful. But she's not going to get me there. She's not going to get me over the top of the ice peak of the mountain. And so she can come with me into this new identity, and I will take the bits that work still. And I can leave some of the other parts of her behind because I don't need them in this next phase, which is very exciting. One of the things around pleasing, which has also been shown to me in the last week or two, is the work that I have personally done around boundaries in my life. And I would say up until a couple of years ago, I had very leaky boundaries, sometimes non-existent. I didn't even really understand what they were. And I first noticed that in my parenting journey, where I was not setting good boundaries for one of my eldest. And he was getting more and more dysregulated because I'd be like, oh, you can't do that. And I'd be like, oh, it's okay. Because I didn't want to like upset him, which was, if anyone listening to parent, you're probably like, oh shit, I've done that. And it actually just creates more of a spiraling effect, really, because they feel like they can't trust you as a sturdy leader because you say one thing and then you like pull it back a minute or two later when it looks like it might upset them or not make them happy. And so with boundaries, I had to learn that my job was not to make my child happy or other people happy. Boundaries for me about being really clear around what my needs are, what's in, what's out, but doing it from a place of love and positive intent. They are not selfish, which I used to think sometimes people were selfish, but that was a part being triggered in me. And also, like, I think that to be clear is to be kind. So thanks, Brene Brown. But with boundaries, if now that I'm letting go of this pleaser part, I feel a lot of self-trust and confidence in saying to people, this is how it's going to work. I'm going to be doing this, but I'll need you to do that. And so this is how I'll engage with you. And when we're this clear, there's actually no second guessing. There's no assumptions. And when it comes from a place of love and positive intent, most people are like, thank you. Okay, cool. Like, this is great. It's super clear. And when you don't have boundaries, it can turn into like confusion and sometimes even manipulation or big assumptions being made, which leads to more confusion and sometimes disagreement. And so someone I've been coaching actually knew me as a much younger version of me. They've known me most of my life. And so it's been interesting in coaching them, noticing in me now. We've been doing some work on boundaries in the coaching container for them. And it's been a really beautiful moment to acknowledge how far I've come on boundaries because we're working on coaching boundaries with them. And it's just stuff that now I do on autopilot, which means it's no longer like things that I need to think about setting a boundary. It's part of who I am, which is a beautiful place to be. And I don't want to like make this sound easy because I said 2 or 3 years ago, I had no boundaries or very leaky boundaries. And so it has been a lot of work to get here. But that's why I feel like I'm getting close to this peak because my boundaries now are airtight, rock solid, and they come from a place of love and acceptance, which is very different in the past where I thought that they were like selfish and they had negative energy attached to them. And therefore, sometimes they'd come out as too strong, too critical, too judgy, too sassy. And now they're not coming out of that. They're fair, they're kind, they're clear, and they're all for positive intent. One of the other pieces that is coming with me on this next level of my identity is my relationship and self-trust in my intuition. And last night, I re-listened to a call with an intuitive mentor I worked with in early last year. It was from April last year, so a little over 12 months ago. And in this call, I'd actually been wanting to rewatch it because the memory's been playing over in my mind a little bit recently. But in this call, she said to me that I needed to publicly own my intuitive gifts and share that this is part of who I am and that I use it in my coaching. It's always been a part of who I am. When I was little, I was intuitive. I have quite a lot of memories, but my light was dimmed as a child and I didn't actively continue using my intuition. I remember being in corporate and explaining to my leadership coach about 5 or 6 years ago about how I could walk into a meeting room or a room I was facilitating and how I could read the energy in the room and how I knew different people were and where they were at in their energy or emotional level. And I used that as part of my facilitation. And I remember at the time, she said to me, do you realize that's not most people don't do that? And now I'm a coach. I have these conversations all the time because people say stuff and I'm like, do you realize that? No, that's not that's your view of the world, but not everyone sees the world through that lens or has that gift or has that superpower. And so I love those penny drop moments when I'm coaching people because you're able to deliver a beautiful gift to them of this is something that's really special and unique to you and you need to use it because it's a gift. And so that was one of my cues, I guess, from the universe back then. And I was like, oh, not everybody does this. I thought everybody did this. I thought this was just why I was good with people. And so flashback 12 months when I was working with Coach, I actually watched the video back last night. And when she said to me, I need to come out of my spiritual closet, she called it, which is hilarious. I was like, my stone-faced in my reaction. You guys know I'm very like reactive and expressive. And I could see I was frozen because at that point in time, I had some close friends who were intuitive as well, who knew about what I was going through, and my other half knew about what I was going through. But I was starting to use my intuition in coaching, but in a overt way. So I wasn't telling people what I was doing. And I didn't feel comfortable with it, to be honest. I was worried about judgment. I was worried that people would reject me. The people pleaser in me was online. Anyway, clearly I've done a fair bit of work on that because when I launched Limitless, I talked about my breakthrough and awakening in the very first episode. So fast forward 6 months from that, I had sort of come to terms with a lot of that. But I feel like this week, remembering that, actually getting to watch the video and take myself back a little over 12 months ago, I'm able to see where I was in that point in time. And I needed to remember her and where she was at to, I think, inform this next step up over the mountain, which hopefully is going to happen in the next few weeks. And I think also I had another realization in the last week when I was in my coaching certification that when we were practicing this work, we go deep into people's bodies, into their subconscious. We use our intuition to help read where people are at, to tune into their energy. My intuition is now becoming a huge part of how I show up in the world as a coach, on this podcast, as a mom, as a partner, as a friend, and really integrating it to everything I do, how I lead, how I live, how I love is actually making me feel more aligned and more authentic than I ever have before. And I said to my coach after the session, I was like, when I was in our certification and we were going through this practicing of these new techniques and taking people into their body, using our intuition, using our gifts, reading energy, I said to her, I had this realization that like 2 years ago, I was like, oh, yeah, psychic, or if I read a book on spirit guides or something like that, that I was sort of just like dabbling, and it was a little bit of a passion project on the side. And last week I was like, this is my world now. And like total pinch me moment of like, I get to integrate this part of me, this true, authentic part of me into everything I do. And what a gift. And it was one of those moments of like, wow, this is why we're here. This is what we're shooting for. And you know, this used to be my secret weapon, and it was so secret, I wasn't even aware of it. But now it's not a secret. And I know that those of you who are listening and tuning into this, you're either with me on this journey or you've got enough curiosity that you're still here and you're tuning in every week, and that you're like, there's something in what Fee's doing is that I want to be a part of this, and I want to ignite this in my world, in my life, in my work, in my business, in everything I do. One of the cool things that I wanted to share around somatic experiencing is, and what I went through in the yoga session is that, and this has been a shift for me, because when I first started coaching, I was doing neuroscience-based, mindset-based coaching. And now I'm using that, but I'm also molding it or weaving it beautifully into this body-based coaching. So it's when we actually take the cognitive mind offline and we go deep into the body. And it helps release trauma. It helps release unprocessed emotion without needing to work on it. You can go there, let your body lead. And through a guided way, you can release and dissolve blocks that have been with you for years, decades, days, depending on the time frame. And so this week in some of my coaching containers, we have been going into the clients' bodies. And it's been really interesting because a lot of my clients are going through major transformations. And when we go into their bodies, where they're noticing in their bodies is sensation or tension in most people have described it as their upper tummy, upper abdomen, or even their diaphragm. And what's really cool about this, and I have had the same sensation as well in a breathwork session I did with a friend yesterday. This part of our body, if you know about energy centers, we've got different energy centers that start at the base of our spine and go up to the crown of our head. This part of our body, though, the upper part of your abdomen, is called the solar plex. And it is the energy center in your body, the emotional center of your body where transformation occurs. So it's been fascinating that the people in my coaching containers, when we've been dropping into our bodies to heal resistance and blocks that are there, every single one of them this week have dropped into that part of their body. And so what this tells me intuitively is that we are in a season where a lot of people are going through this transition and this transformation, stepping into new identities, really letting go of who they were and stepping into who they want to be. Now, if you've been having this sense yourself as well, and you're like, actually, I'm done doing me and I really want to take this leap, please don't hesitate to reach out. We can start this work in a 90-minute coaching session, a breakthrough session, and see what comes up. Or we can talk about a 4-month container, which is my longer container, where we de-layer and peel back all those onion layers to get to your true self, your purpose-led self. And I would love to be your guide in this work. I want you to know that if you're in the in-between space at the moment, or if you're like me, you're at the top, but your ice axes keep sliding down the ice, that this space is sacred, and it is the last push before you get over the top of the mountain. And so as I've been practicing this week, it's really important to be compassionate to yourself, to be kind to yourself, to grieve the parts of you that you're letting go of, to forgive the parts of you who you may not feel so proud of anymore. And you wonder, why the fuck did I do that for so many years? Being with this tenderness and knowing that what got you here is all okay and who you're becoming is so exciting. So you're not falling behind, you're not broken. Even though you might feel stuck, you're not stuck. You actually, as we do this work, we're falling closer and closer into alignment. We're letting go of the old. We're trusting the process. We're trusting the new. And the version of you that you're becoming, she isn't just new, she's true. He's true. It's your authentic self. If this episode resonates and you're in the middle or on the verge of an identity shift where your old patterns no longer fit, or you're getting that knock on your door, those nudges internally that something bigger with more impact, more purpose is calling you, then please reach out. As you heard today, my coaching containers integrate now neuroscience-based mindset, all the emotions, this somatic healing and integration, which is where the patterns dissolve very quickly and seamlessly. And I wrap it all in bringing my full intuitive gifts to the table so that you can fully recalibrate your identity and step into this new version of you who's in purpose, who's clear, who's kind, who's all the things you dream of being, who you know you were put on this earth to be. So please reach out. And if you love this episode, please share it with a friend, hit subscribe and follow. And I can't wait to speak to you next time we do a solo. Thank you for tuning in to Limitless. If you enjoyed today's episode and love hearing the stories of courageous cycle breakers, I'd be grateful if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your feedback not only helps others discover the show, but it also amplifies our mission to unlock emotional freedom and true potential. Every review makes a difference in helping more people embrace their limitless life.